Welcome. I'm Alice Alicia Jones, and this is another one of my Living Consciously videos. I offer these every single Friday at 1 o'clock, and will continue doing this as long as I'm told by my guides that I'm supposed to do this. Uh, Today's lesson is going to be a continuation of the 12-step program for becoming your higher self. And this is number 6 as part of the 12-step program. And it's all about the power of forgiveness. And it says, I am ready to forgive myself and forgive every person, place, or thing that has harmed me, including myself. I truly do believe that all of us have within us enough circumstances in our life that caused us to have to get to a place of forgiveness, have to get to a place where we could no longer hold on to the grudges that we were holding on to because they were hurting us more than they were hurting anybody. And effectively, the as is typical in everything that I do, I teach from my personal life. I teach from the example that I have in my own existence. And in January of 1996, I had an well, I had an incident that happened that could have effectively destroyed my marriage, could have taken me to a place where I would not have continued in my marriage. And when I had my astrological chart done in the early 2000s, she looked at my chart and she asked me, she said, what happened in 1995, 1996 that what did you experience? And of course, by then I think it was 2004 or 2005. And so I thought back in my memory and I realized that, oh my God, yes, the biggie was that I had determined at some point in 95 and towards the end of 95 that I wanted to follow my spiritual path on a full-time basis, and that I could only do real estate on a part-time basis. Up to that point, I had been a full-time real estate broker and in listing and selling, as well as running a property management company. And at the peak, I had 90, no, I'm sorry, not 90, 44 properties that I managed by myself. If obviously it felt like 90 to me, uh, but it it was just an excruciatingly busy time because in the 80s, in 81, I gave birth to my first child. In 84, I gave birth to my second child. So obviously, my children were still young enough to where their mommy's presence was pretty important. But I found myself neck deep in problems in real estate. And the mid 90s, uh, we had gone through several other crises in the 80s. Uh, in the mid 90s, real estate was selling very, very well, but there was something um, already kind of amiss. There was an undercurrent in the real estate market that came out later. But what I discovered is that I really lost my heart for real estate. I no longer had it in my heart to list and sell and do the property management in the same manner that I had before. And so as a result, I kept trying to convince my husband that I no longer wanted to do this. And he literally thought that something was wrong with me because I had built my sales up to the point where I was earning around 100,000 a year. And we were obviously, we had 2 children to think about putting into college, and we had plenty of expenses of our own, and so he literally thought, um, I know, I won't go into the whole list of what he thought, but he literally didn't take me seriously, is the best way I could put it. And so it didn't matter how hard I tried to convince him, I wasn't getting to first base. He absolutely did not believe that I needed to get out of real estate full time. That it no longer served my heart's desire the way it did when I first started. Because there was a time when I literally felt that I would live and die as a real estate broker. There would be no other career in my life. And because I was so happy in it. And so effectively, he could not see anything about my arguments that were valid in his mind. So I grew more and more and more desperate. At the end of 1995, I started to study A Course in Miracles. And very soon after I walked into my first group setting, there were 16 people there, and we went once a week. So it was a very intense study. Of course, it wasn't once a month, it was once a week. It was a real commitment. I, all of a sudden, the voice inside my head, which I was completely familiar with because the voice inside my head had always been there, had always guided me, had always made me, was a companion to me, all of a sudden is telling me, you have to leave, you have to leave, you have to leave, you have to leave. And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, oh, what do I do? How? How do I do this? And the more I listen to the voice, the more, um, I guess the only way to describe it is to say comfortable that I become with it. And the more I say to myself that I have to do this, because if I don't do this, I know I won't die. I know that, but I'll be very, very sick. And then I'll be of no use to anybody. Because I already was experiencing such excruciating back pain. And then on top of that, I had ear pain. And on top of that, occasionally my vision would um, just go into some kind of a blurry image where I would see a ring of light and the light would just grow and grow and grow and grow until I saw nothing but light. And this would be out of one eye. So I had normal vision in one eye and none in the other. And other symptoms that were just really strange. So I knew that I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker and that I had to do what the voice commanded me to do. So the next step was to write a letter. This is what I was told to do is that I would never get the words out that I needed to get out, but I needed to write a letter. And then I was told that I had to give the letter to my husband and to both of my children. My son was soon to be 12, and my daughter was soon to be, well, I think she was soon to be 15. So they were 11 and 14. But they, I struggled with the letter, but under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, wrote the most loving letter that I could fashion. And probably one of these days, I'll share it publicly because I still do have a copy of it. But And I struggled with my decision because I kept thinking, what kind of mother leaves her children? What kind of mother leaves her children? I just couldn't fathom that. And yet I was being told to take nothing with me except my car, my clothes, and a few personal mementos, and that was it. So I then wrote the letter, prayed to the Holy Spirit to be given the exact time to have the to present the letter to my husband. And when he when I finally did get what I felt was the right opportunity, and I gave it to him, he looked up at me after reading it because I kind of hung around him, and he said, "You're leaving us?" And his next words were, "Alice, if you were telling me that you're leaving us because you want to have an affair with somebody, I would understand it more than I understand this. You're leaving us to follow your God." So, and all I could say is, yes. And his reaction was instantaneous. And he said, "You can do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to accept your offer of just me, divorcing me, having me marry anybody I want, having taking the children, taking the investments, taking the house, taking everything. I'm not going to accept that." So effectively, he was then and he thought that was the end of it. But I had been instructed by the voice inside my head to give the letter to each child. As I gave it to my daughter and she read it, 14 going on 15, she looked up at me. She said, "You're leaving us?" Whatever. And walked out, walked back to her room, absorbed in her own stuff. My son had an opposite reaction. He burst into tears and he said, "Mom, you're going to ruin my life the way my best friend's mom ruined his life when she left the family. She changed uh, her sexual orientation and just left and left them in charge of a housekeeper, and just felt that the husband, made enough money to buy whatever help he needed, to bring in whatever help that he needed." And so I looked at his reaction, and in a sense, it didn't surprise me, and it kind of broke my heart because it was typical of what a little, boy might react at his age. And I also, at the same time, uh, told my sister what I was doing or what I was in the process of doing. And her reaction was, she turned to her husband apparently, and she doesn't say, I don't know if she said this to me, but she turned to her husband and said, "Alice is single-handedly destroying her family." And apparently, then when she objected to what I was going to do, she tells me this because I have no memory of it. She said that I replied, "Well, I don't need you in my life either." And so, if effectively, what have I done? First of all, you can look at it that way. that I single handedly would have, or could have, or did destroy my family, the integral core of my family. But you could also look at it differently. You could look at it from of the biblical story of Abraham, the test of Abraham, when God demanded that Abraham sacrifice his only son, put him on an altar, and effectively sacrifice him, and then took him to the mountaintop, strapped him to the altar, had the sword raised in order to kill him. And then the angel of the Lord came and stopped him because God was only testing his devotion. And so, in one sense, I passed the test of Abraham because I was willing to do it. I got to keep it. I did not have to give everything up. I was able to stay because my husband loved me enough to keep me and say that you can do whatever it is that you need to do, whatever it is that you have to do with your life. I'm not sure he ever forgave me for giving the letter to the children because he thought that once I gave it to him, that was it. But I grew up in a family where there were family secrets, and I did not want that for my children. I wanted that out in the open. And so, right or wrong, it's it. I followed the instruction of the voice inside my head, and I felt ultimately I did apologize to the members of my family years later. And when I realized that the only reason that I had to go through this exercise was because I did not believe in myself. I did not believe in my ability to convince the people that I loved that this is what I needed for my own spiritual growth, and that this is now what I had to do with my life. I didn't believe in my own ability. So every single time I get to a job to do something that I feel is beyond me, I have that memory of that period of time where I was told to give a letter to leave my family, and I was willing to do it. So that in a sense, it helps me overcome the fear because I now recognize there was a better way. There was a different way. I could have just stood my ground. I could have just said, "No, I'm quitting full-time real estate. I'm going into part-time real estate. I'm giving up the listing and the selling," which is what my the my guides demanded of me, because that, even though yes, that earned 85% of my income, it took up a great deal of my time, and there was so much processing afterwards, and I didn't employ a processor, so I was it. I was my own secretary, as well as the lister and seller, and there was just too much paperwork. So anyway, I the reason that I share this with you is that effectively you have to somehow or other find the courage to go after what it is that you feel is right for you. And when you encounter the obstacles, and when you encounter the people that maybe stop you, pay attention to what they're saying, but believe in your own ability to accomplish the task, whatever that task is that you set for yourself. I truly feel that the first person I had to forgive in this whole scenario was me, because I'm the one who set it all in motion. I think my son And I finally, when he turned 21, I think he always kind of had this feeling of looking over his shoulder, wondering, is mom going to be there the next day? Is mom going to be gone? But again, after talking to him about it and apologizing to him, I I got him to at the end he said, "I get it, mom. I get it." He doesn't believe in my spiritual path, but that's okay. It's right for me. It's not right for him. And yet he he did, like I said, hold on to resentment for a while. And I but unfortunately we were able to get over that hump. So effectively, please do remember that forgiveness is critical. It's going to come up. If you need a lesson in forgiveness, it's going to show up for you. It doesn't matter how well intentioned your actions are. It doesn't matter um, how much you're doing from the kindness of your heart. If somebody else is carrying a different opinion of what it is that you're doing or have done, they could effectively slam you for something that you feel you don't deserve because you had only the best intentions. So just be aware of that. The word forgive, forgiveness, forgiving appears in A Course in Miracles. If I have the number exactly correct, I think 2,528 times, over 2,500 times. It's the single word that appears the most. So it really is an incredibly important word for us to understand, and it is the one of the ways you get off the wheel of karma, be by forgiving, because otherwise, when you stop to think, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, leaves us all toothless and blind. And that's the way the world operates. That's the way it's operated for millennia. And we just have to get to a place where we can forgive, because otherwise, the rage that builds up inside of us effectively only does one thing: it poisons the vessel that the rage is stored in, which is our body, the vessel that carries us through this lifetime. So I do really appreciate your attendance here. And I think, oh my gosh, again, 25 minutes. I always try to keep these to 15 minutes and never seem to work. But anyway, I will see you next week. I will go on to lesson to number 7. I am ready to relinquish fear completely and all its related companions. And I'll have to see how many more um, to do, because they absolutely told me I had to concentrate the whole day on forgiveness. The story, same story I gave you, is related in Own Your Power Day by Day, and which is my book of meditations. Fabulous book. If you don't own it, I certainly recommend. If you go to my website and get it, you'll get an endorsed copy by me. And I do pay the shipping and handling too, the same as Amazon does. So, and the price is $24.99 for the hardback. Wish you all a happy Easter It's in just a few days. Today is Good Friday. Just dawned on me. If Easter's 2 days from now, this is Good Friday. Um, Very chilly out there in Virginia. One of the chilliest days. I think it fell to 33, and yet March was one of our warmest months. Um, so, really do wish you all a, a very pleasant, very lovely holiday. And we are obviously seeing the end of COVID, which I'm entirely grateful. Thank you.